Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. As you know, for the past few weeks, we've been coming back to our Healthy Leaders series. And what that's really about is we're talking about how a leader needs to be well or healthy in our mind, our body, and our spirit. And so today I have a wonderful guest on who is just touching so many lives right now and helping to people to integrate their spiritual wellness with their mental wellness. And it is just so beautiful, the work she's doing. So I wanted to come and share it all with you so that you could understand what some of the work that we can do. What are our options out here in this world that we've got to help bring us as to better leaders and bring us all together in the wholeness of ourselves. So Virginia Charlesworth, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am a wife, a mom, a Catholic. I'm a registered social worker. So I work here in private practice. You can see kind of my office space behind me, and psychotherapy act is kind of what I would, the kind of clinical language that we would use, but I love variety. I see adults, children, families, and love that diversity in the course of my day. I'm passionate about the integration of our psychological sciences with the Catholic Church and with everything that we hold to be true as Catholics. I'd say that's where my strengths and my passion. I have a degree in theology and did a double major at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Catholic theology as well as mental health, and then went on to get my master's degree in social work. So the Lord's just, so good to have equipped me with what I feel like I need to do this role really well.
That is awesome. So you said you have a lot of variety. So you work with adults, children, families. Why do you like to keep that breadth of where you're working?
That's a good question. I have parts that get bored easily. If I'm really honest, I think that's really part of it. I think if I saw, middle-aged women all day, I might kind of get a little bored. But I also see kiddos, and kiddos just breathe a freshness and brightness into the day when I get an opportunity to. You can see kind of behind me my sand tray space and, playing games. You can see them, but games that we play and just being able to connect in those just playful ways are really important to me. So yeah, teens bring a whole other energy, a lot of buy-in when it comes to teens. Although there are more and more teens that use it as sort of this badge of honor. Therapist, it's like a handbag.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a shift in this generation, which is beautiful.
That is beautiful. I think that, from my side of things, I think that like all those integrated things, because like a parent needs help with their children. So your experience with that can bring so much light to what you're doing as well. So I just think that there is probably a beauty in that whole scope of what you're doing too. So I think that your love of variety is definitely bringing value to
strength, weakness, I don't know. It just is.
The Lord will take our weaknesses and make wonderful things from it.
It's true. Turn them into whatever He's going to use them for.
Yes.
But it's true. There is a common kind of theme in our work where therapists might shy away from working with kids because a lot of working with kids is working with parents. And so, okay, I'll see the parents, but kind of leave the kiddos to the real adventurous people like myself, I guess, who are not afraid to deal with parents and children. I mean, if you think about parenting, I think most of us would say that that's probably where our passion lies. And so, it's beautiful and messy to enter into that passion with folks. to, join them in their parenting journey. And it's such an honor. I always say to clients, like, it's such sacred space to go with them, such sacred space to be in those spaces that are so deep and personal, and where their passion lies. So it's an honor. Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's great. It's beautiful for me to hear that that refreshes you, that variety too. So
Mm.
like that's one thing I really like I pull on with the working genius work that I do is that sometimes we're going to do things that eventually feel hard. So find a refreshing
Mm.
activity. So beautiful that you can do that in your work.
I feel grateful that I can. I feel grateful for the space to see kiddos. I feel grateful for, also for that variety of, I would say a chunk of my folks come virtually from all over the province of Ontario. So there's that, kiddos are trickier to see virtually, but I do appreciate that sort of variety as well. Okay, there's folks coming in my door, but then, okay, I'm logging into my Zoom room, and I teach a little bit too, and I enjoy that piece of my work too. So.
Oh, wonderful. So I first got connected with you because of some of your work in internal family systems, but also the way that you integrate Catholic faith into your work. So can you tell
Mhm.
us first a little bit about internal family systems? What is it? I think there's a lot of confusion just by the name. I
Mhm.
know I was initially confused. I was like, are we going to talk about like our family of origin and talk about that? But
Right.
I
Yeah.
think it's different. So why don't you tell us first what it is? Just give people an overview.
Well, it isn't so different, really. Like, we can understand immediately what family is. I mean, typically parents, kiddos, and trying to build beautiful, messy life together. And what internal family systems would say, and I think where that name kind of comes from, is that we actually have that kind of dynamic. Not exactly, like our mom and our dad are inside us in this very literal way, but in a very kind of a figurative way, we have an internal family that operates in this messy, beautiful kind of way. And internal family systems, if you've ever encountered it, you know that they kind of use this parts language. And so parts are the way we maybe would name a sibling figure, for example, or a parental figure. We can have maybe say inner critics that sound a lot like some of the things our parents might used to say to us. And so we focus that internal way on who's inside. And internal family systems actually says, who's in here? We don't need, anybody else. But just that these parts can be so powerful. And so we sometimes say drive the bus in ways that sometimes don't serve us well. But we also say parts help and hinder, like my getting bored part. It helps me love a variety. And sometimes it gets in the way when I've been seeing the same client all day and I'm like, a toothpaste in my eye, right? So it helps and hinders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. So, what's the goal of working on identifying the parts and bringing them out? Like, what is the goal there?
Such a good question. Actually, what I love about internal family systems, the goal would be almost like the trunk of a tree, for example, has these many branches. The trunk of the tree, internal family systems would say, is this, if I redeem the language a little bit and borrow language from Dr. Jerry Crete, who is a real giant in the field of integrating the Catholic anthropology with internal family systems. He would say the inmost self, and it's beautiful. That language actually comes all the way from Saint Augustine. He names there's an inmost self that we want to kind of plug back into. That's centuries old. And so it's beautiful to almost resurrect, a concept or language that has been part of our tradition. He's a church father. So, and almost to find, to integrate this new, I mean, internal family system has been around since the 80s. It's not age old, but it can plug into this age old concept of inmost self. So what internal family systems would say is when our parts can plug into that inmost self or get to know that actually there's a healing ability that happens from the inmost self. Because what we would hold is that this inmost self is internal family systems uses the language of lowercase s and uppercase s. this way that the inmost self is sort of the breath of the Lord internally. Dr. Jerry Creek calls it the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, like the seat of our Lord inside. And we know that to be true, that we are all created in the image and likeness of God. And so when we can plug into that internal, inmost self is the way I like to call it, that the Lord is there. Healing is available to us, no matter what we've been through or the intensity of experiences that parts have held up to now. There is that deep healing available. Just such a hopeful. Here we are, the year of hope, right?
I
So
know.
much
Yes,
hope in that.
exactly. And I
So
feel
much
like we've been
hope.
talking about that a lot. So I'm glad that's coming in.
Yay!
So, okay, so we come together, we get all this healing. How does that affect our lives?
Such a good question. Can I zoom out or kind of go backwards into internal family systems? Another way that internal family systems aligns with our Catholic faith is this anthropology that, again, that we are created in the image and likeness of God and that we are created good. And so internal family systems would say there's no bad parts, even the ones that cause us to eat a bag of chips every night or can't get us off the couch to, get out to move our body, or ones that, maybe yell at our children. I mean, these are all parts, and we would say there's no bad parts. They absolutely can lead us to sin. Yeah, we hold that to be true. But internal family systems uses this sun cloud analogy that we are created good, and this is sunny, that there is so much good because the Lord has given us that through baptism, that what happens is clouds roll in, and clouds can be these parts that block the sunshine. And so let's say, okay, you've got a leader who's doing beautiful work, is very powerful, very kind, very strong, all of those things. It may be very parts led in that work. And we would say the same of ourselves as therapists. I could be a very parts led therapist. I could have very big therapist parts doing my work for me. That's good. That's fine in a way. And there can be some drawbacks to that as well. I mean, we would want fuller integration, ideally, with that inmost self. So where our work can kind of flow from, and I know you do the geniuses, right? When our work can flow from that inmost self, then, we're less likely to burn out. We have parts that aren't going to because parts get tired over a while. Because it isn't authentic. It isn't kind of it's not flowing from the Lord, really. And so internal family systems would say that when we can, the language they use is unblend from parts that may be trying to do our work for us, then we have more sustainability. We have more authenticity. We can not have a cloud roll in, and not that would never happen, but to make a misstep, for example. Again, not that we never make a misstep if we're, paying attention to our parts, but could be caught by the inmost self in that moment. Mm-hmm.
It's so beautiful because we all want to be this perfect and lead well and do everything right all the
Mm-hmm.
time. But we will have parts. We do have these parts, but when they get in the bus, when they get in the driver's seat, they can take us askew or
Mm-hmm.
astray or away from the plan that we want to be on, or
Mm-hmm.
that behavior we want to be having, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what creates the parts? Like, how do these parts get there?
Such a good question. It's such a good question. They come about, I mean, internal family systems would say from experiences, from life that happens, where we use kind of an analogy of a kiddo. A kiddo who might go through something hard, and maybe they didn't have somebody available to them to say, oh my gosh, that was really awful. Sorry you had to go through that. Witnessing, they didn't have somebody in that moment witnessing with them. We would say a part might evolve in that moment that would try and protect that kiddo. right?
Mhm.
Ideally, as parents, we're that person for our kiddos that can be in those difficult moments and notice with them and be able to kind of support them through difficult circumstances. But all kinds of life happens. And so we would say that parts pop up for lots of good reasons.
Mhm.
Maybe my board parts popped up because I was bored. I can think about all kinds of circumstances where, my parents needed Saturdays and Sundays to rest because they worked hard. I had some board parts.
Mhm.
So these parts grow and come to serve us well, and sometimes not so serve us so well. And so, when we do internal family systems therapy, we sometimes ask a question that sounds like, how long has this part been doing this with you or for you, if it's really driving the bus?
Mhm.
And I hear a variety of ages, parts that can be. I was just sharing this with my husband. I had a part that was so clearly like 20 weeks in utero.
Oh.
I was 20 weeks old. And so I remember phoning my mom going, "What happened? Like, was there something that happened when you were 20 weeks pregnant with me?" She immediately, as clear as day, was like, "I got a gall attack. I sat straight up in bed and I thought I was losing you." All the muscles in my abdomen actually ripped in that moment. And she was in tremendous amount of pain. So anyway, I don't know. That's my crazy funky system that goes all the way back. But it was an amazing connection that my system could kind of
Mhm.
remember. And that pair up with a truth that my mom experienced, and she knew right away what that was. So there was something. Anyway, I can share more about that. I'm happy to do so. But parts say all kinds of ages. I mean, I have a bunch of sassy teenager parts that get saying all kinds of sassy stuff. There's my husband has some guys that got kind of activated when he was about 12. There are some things that happened in their family. So he's got a lot of kind of those 11, 12-year-old parts that
Mhm.
get pretty busy sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Wow,
can be
that's
a variety of things.
so how would someone start to discover what parts they have, who they are, what ages they are? How would that
Mhm. Well, it's playful. I mean, I enjoy the kind of just language around that. It's- my kids, we talk about their parts, and they have this very wild, open dialogue about their parts.
Mhm.
My one son has a toe over the line parts. It's just kind of always pushing the boundary, and he knows it, and we all know it. It's very real and present in our home, and so he has some ADHD that you know runs amok sometimes, and so we know that part really well. But how do we go about it? I mean, we start with, and I think that's where it converges a little bit on the work that you do. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Who am I? What makes me tick? What are some of those ones that really work? And where does burnout? That's where we sometimes notice parts as well. Once they're screaming at us, we go, "I wonder if there's a part here." And maybe they've been quiet up to now. And all of a sudden, whatever happens, and they start getting loud.
Mhm. Mhm. I know, like, I'm still in the early stages of discovering my parts, but I can feel I've
Hmm.
got this little one that yells and screams and wants to be heard, but a very strong protector one that says shh. So it's
Yes.
funny how I've seen that come out in my life too with the things that I struggle with.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
fun to work on, well, fun, but not fun.
Fun.
Fun, we'll say, yeah. But, but wonderful to work on understanding what's holding me back from doing the things that I want to do, and understanding it is
Hmm.
just a very strong protector part that is really just trying to keep me safe. So,
Hmm.
we talk about like our stress responses are just trying to keep us safe. And that's, what that is, just a part of us trying to keep us safe. And
Hmm.
it's almost relieving to feel it that way, so that it's not something wrong with us. It's just
Absolutely.
us. And when we understand it, When we name it, we can tame it. You know what? All that language.
Exactly. Totally.
When we understand it, we can do something with it. So
Mhm.
it's become. So it's.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, internal family systems would say that when we can plug into that inmost self, there's these 8C kind of qualities that are more available to us. I don't have them in front of me. I'll probably not name them all, but one of them is compassion, which I think is, what you're naming here is that when we can see a protector that's maybe trying to isolate us or keep us really safe by not calling a friend if we need help, for example. I mean, we can objectively see that might not be serving us so well, but when we can see it as a protector, we go, I can be compassionate towards, this part trying to really keep me safe. Maybe someone's hurt me in the past, so why would I reach out for help? This kind of, thing that we might get kind of stuck in that. So other qualities of self are clarity. When some of that confusion, I always think of St. Paul when the scales fall from his eyes, when this clarity can come and we go, oh Lord, like I just see that so differently now. Or another one is confidence. And that might be where some things converge on, leadership as well. How beautiful to think that we have some parts that could be blocking our confidence. And I see that all the time. I see that in teenagers. I just had a kiddo yesterday, been working with her for a few years, and she was able to sit there and say, I have so much more confidence now than I did back, when we first started working together. She was struggling with some self-esteem struggles and, body image pieces. And so once we could get to know name to tame those parts, they were actually willing to give her some space so she can feel really good in her own skin and yeah, perform better at school and be a really lovely friend. And how old is she? She's going into grade. She's in grade 6. So how old is that? 11 or something. So yeah, it's even possible. So beautiful to start this work early. I always say, yes, kiddos are like green wood. They're so moldable and formable that when we can get to know their parts really early on,
Yes.
they tend to not get in charge in the way that sometimes us adults get forged in a certain
Yes.
rhythm of doing things.
Especially in those adolescent years when it's just
Hmm.
crazy. What a wonderful skill set to have at that age.
Absolutely. Have
Wow,
language for that.
beautiful.
Such a gift.
So, if somebody wanted to get started working on identifying parts or get started just on some of this sort of work, what would you tell them to do? How would they start?
Such a good question. I remember when I first started as a therapist, I had a friend who was a therapist. She wasn't my therapist, but she was a little bit ahead of me in her career. And she said, you know what? Don't ever get to thinking that the only way to heal, grow, be the best version of yourself is to do therapy. And I've really leaned on that because it isn't. It certainly isn't. Sometimes it's working with a really good spiritual director who can be that. St. Therese talks about a spiritual director being a mirror who can mirror things back to you. And all of a sudden then you go, oh, that might be, if we integrated that with IFS language, we'd say that might be a part. Right. Maybe not using that language in spiritual direction, but you go, oh, I can see that, or you can find that self-awareness. Um, Therapy is certainly possible, and I think you'll share my contact information, but there's beautiful books out there. There's Dr. Jerry Creed, who I mentioned, wrote a book called Litanies of the Heart, really lovely, about a Catholic integration with this parts language. And there's another book that came out about a year ago. I have it somewhere, but it's Befriending Your Inner Child by Bria Hannon. And she does that IFS kind of inner child work, where we get to know those inner children. So she's another beautiful resource. She has a really thriving Instagram. Just journaling, prayer, these kinds of rhythms that we do. Just thinking, grounding ourselves in scripture and those kinds of things. So, yeah.
Awesome. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, email is probably the best way. You'll link up to my email. I have two Instagrams that are kind of similar. I have a kind of Catholic, it's called Integro Life Coaching, because in our province we're mandated to stay regionally, and so I'm only mandated to practice the active psychotherapy in the province of Ontario, but there's no regulation regarding coaching. And so if folks sort of further, wider, broader borders than our province of Ontario wanted to access services with me, we can do that under kind of like a coaching umbrella. So that's possible. And in the province of Ontario, I have my other Instagram, which is called Integro Counseling. And that is where folks locally can kind of get to know me and a little bit more about internal family systems and what I do.
Thank you so much. This has been so educational for me, and I'm assuming my listeners, just to really understand. It helps to understand and get behind why we behave certain ways. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when we get stuck, it's like we can do a lot with just controlling our thoughts, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we still get stuck. And this is such a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful avenue, a wonderful way to integrate this and to integrate ourselves into our whole selves and heal, which is really what we need
Absolutely.
to do to do God's will, to serve our teams, to serve our families, and to really be the best stewards in our lives. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much
Absolutely.
for
Yes,
sharing
thank you.
your gifts with us. And listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, subscribe to the podcast, comment on the YouTube, and share it with a friend, and also leave a review, because that is how we get the algorithms working well to share it more with others. And this is just such a beautiful thing that we want to share. So thank you so much. And I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.